echo. And no, we shouldn't have an echo. I don't know why you have to do it twice. I mean, you saw me do that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Just testing really quick if I can be heard in the room.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Why aren't our cameras on?
So it says that the host has blocked the ability to do video.
Um, I didn't do that on purpose.
I've never run a webinar before, so I don't know if you get like more settings within the meeting to try to update that. Let me Google it. Hold on.
I mean,
I don't mind not being on camera.
oh, we'd love your face.
Wow, panelists is their video right now.
Oh, okay. Does it still say that, Angie?
Oh,
Nope,
yeah.
now it'll let me turn it on. I guess
There
I'll
you are.
actually turn some light on so you can maybe see my face. I have my living room set up so that it's like a cave because I hate the big light. And that's great until I go to get on a Zoom and I'm like, oh, I guess people might want to be able to see.
Yeah.
So I have my nifty little mushroom lamp. Oh, it doesn't show up very well. But anyway,
Ooh, that's
that
neat.
that illuminates my face a little bit.
I love it. Yeah, it does kind of look like you're a gamer on YouTube.
Yeah. Um, I finally have a new webcam at work, so I don't have to wear a headset there anymore, but I have like a bigger headset and I look like I'm working air traffic control.
I don't know why our cameras are not turning on in council chambers.
That is interesting.
Usually, when I click the button, it will eventually come on. Maybe. Then try to power it off and see if that works. Yes. Can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no. Got it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
Oh,
all
there you are.
right. Okay. Can you hear me? Just last time.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Okay, so another thing is that I get to stage, right? So I made myself a script so that I
Okay, are we ready to get started?
Well, we don't quite have a quorum yet.
Okay,
I think we'll give it a few more minutes.
sounds like a plan.
All right, let me start recording and then we'll be ready to go.
Okay, let's call to order the 423rd Regular Planning Commission meeting. Will you do roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Commission Member Ivy,
Present.
Commission Member Tan, I mean,
I
Commission
see.
Member Santayano, Commission Member, I don't see Commission Member Valerio, Commission Member Peters,
Present.
Commission Member Stepper, and Todd Ricewig asked for an excused absence. Commission Member Tan, are you there?
Present.
Ooh, and Commission Member Stepper just walked in. We do have a quorum.
Perfect. And it sounds like we do have a new commissioner to welcome this evening, Nick Ivy.
Thank you.
Welcome to the group. I don't know if we do anything special when we add someone or if we're just acknowledging that we have a new commissioner.
It's just an acknowledgement, but I believe Nick is employed at the Army Corps of Engineers. And he is a Walla Walla County resident. He doesn't live in the city, but we won't hold that against him. He does live on the outskirts of the west end of town. So thank you, Nick, for joining the commission and your willingness to serve your community.
Glad to be here.
John, do you also want to lead the conversation on appearance of fairness doctrine?
Not really.
I can lead it, that's fine.
Or go
Yeah.
ahead. Thank you.
The appearance of fairness doctrine is a rule of law requiring government decision makers to conduct non-court hearings and proceedings in a way that is fair and unbiased in both appearance and fact. The doctrine requires that adjudicatory or quasi-judicial public hearings meet two requirements. They must be procedurally fair, and they must appear to be conducted by impartial decision makers. By following the appearance of fairness requirements, local governments have a method for disqualifying decision makers from quasi-judicial hearings who have prejudged the issue, who have a bias in favor of one side in the proceeding, who have a conflict of interest, or who cannot otherwise be impartial. Ex parte communication between a decision maker and a proponent or opponent of the matter being decided is prohibited per RCW. Sorry, 42.36.060. And then there are two articles that are helpful. Sorry, one is an article and one is a video for learning more about the appearance of fairness doctrine, which hopefully people had a chance to review ahead of the meeting. Are there any questions or concerns? Hearing none. We have public comment on the agenda. Is there any public in the chamber or online?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And that brings us to the consent agenda items. So in the consent agenda, we have the agenda for this meeting and the minutes from the last meeting. And are we adopting parliamentary procedure again, or is that just a standard to be listed there?
It's just always there.
Okay, perfect. So we have the agenda and the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review them? If there aren't any questions or concerns, I would entertain a motion.
You got to turn on your mic.
Was that to me?
To me, I don't know. I move to accept the minutes.
Thank you.
I
Can I get a
second.
second? Thank you.
I think the
Tan.
motion would be to accept the consent agenda. Because we can do the whole,
Oh, yeah.
that whole as one piece. I'm sorry.
Okay, I remove my motion to accept minutes and move to accept the consent agenda.
Thank you. Are you still interested in seconding Commissioner
Yes.
Tan?
Yes. Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed, same sign. I don't know if you guys are catching it better in there. I only heard myself and Commissioner Tan vote.
Aye.
How many do you need? Okay.
We would need a majority of the people present. So I think I heard one in the room, so we have an even split of 3 in favor and 3 not voting.
I also said aye, or I don't know. Did that get, okay.
You're the one in the room I'm counting, unless I've missed someone else in there.
Aye. Brandon.
Okay. We've at least got a majority, 4 votes in favor, 2 abstaining. That brings us to our regular agenda item, the comprehensive plan periodic update.
I've made it so that he can share his screen.
Great, thank you. So what we're going to do tonight is we have Justin Bearlocker with JUB Engineers and Planning they're our consultant that's going to work with us through the comprehensive plan update process. And Justin has prepared a short slide. It's basically what we're kind of doing is a crash course into the comprehensive plan amendment process. And then at the tail end of it, we're going to kind of focus on the first efforts that we'll be working towards kind of the heavy lift of getting going. And feel free to ask questions as Justin goes along, or jot your questions down and we can ask them at the end, however it works for you. We want this to be kind of an open dialogue. It's the only thing on the agenda for the evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin.
All right, thank you, John. Would you like me to share my screen and to go through the slides?
Yeah, that's probably more efficient.
Okay, sounds good. So as John said, my name is Justin Bearlocker. I'm with JUB Engineers. We're the on-call planning and engineering firm for City of College Place. As we continue forward this year, one of our main tasks will be doing this comprehensive plan update as required by the Growth Management Act. There's the Growth Management Act in the state of Washington started in 1990, and several cities and counties were required to plan under the Growth Management Act, and then several cities opted to plan under it. And the Growth Management Act is a planning process that cities are required to plan under, and there's RCWs that regulate the items that need to be planned for and reviewed. And one of those that we'll be going into further today is the urban growth boundary and the city limits and the population forecasts through the for the next 20-year cycle. The City of College Place is a fully planning city within the Growth Management Act, and so is Walla Walla County. And in fact, since Walla Walla County is, every city within the county has to also follow the Growth Management Act for this process. This graphic here shows the cycles that and which counties are required to update their plans per each cycle. Walla Walla County is in the gray, so it's their comprehensive plan update is due on in 2020, and that the update cycle is from 2024 to 2026. So we're towards the first quarter of that is done, and we'll be pushing hard these next 18 months to review the comprehensive plan, bring it to you in periodic meetings for updates and comments as we go through the process. For this year, there is a lot of new changes through different House bills and Senate bills that we'll be looking at and incorporating into the comprehensive plan update. A lot of these new requirements are due to housing. The state's projected a housing need, especially for lower, they call it the missing middle housing. So it's the middle to lower income housing that they're trying to push and trying to make sure that cities are planning for them, and that they're also updating their development regulations and zoning codes to make sure that there's opportunities for this type of housing to happen. Mandatory elements. So the Growth Management Act requires each city and county, when they do a comprehensive plan, to look at all of these elements at a comprehensive look at it, and then also coordinating with the cities and counties within their jurisdiction, and then coordinating it with the water plan and the sewer plan that the city has, and make sure that the growth that's projected for population wise is also, we're also meeting those needs within the other plan elements. So we need to look at land use, housing, capital facilities plan, utilities, transportation, economic development, and parks and recreation. And then in addition to the comprehensive plan update, when that's completed and we've reviewed all the policies and the elements, we'll be coming back and looking through the development regulations as well, and making sure there's consistency between the comprehensive plan and the development regulations, and the development regulations are going to be the enforcement tool to help implement the comprehensive plan goals and policies. This is a timeline that kind of generally talks about how the steps that will be taken through the process. This is from the Department of Commerce, and we might modify this timeline a little bit as we go forward. But it's a general rule of thumb that we'll be following. First starting off on making a work plan, and then identifying, there's a checklist that the state has that goes through all of those elements that we had on the previous page and all of the state requirements and mandates that are required. And we go through that checklist and identify areas that have already been addressed in the previous comp plan that we just need to review and check and make sure that it's still what the city wants. And then also identifying areas where new regulations have been applied and that we need to address in the current comp plan. So we'll be doing that and coming back to you with this checklist and identifying, okay, here's where in the plan we're meeting the requirements, and then these are where we're need to update and fill in. So, a big portion of the comp plan update will be a community engagement plan, and that's meeting with the public, having open houses, meeting with the council and the commission, going over any new things that the city wants to implement. Also identify what the community wants and needs, and see how they want their community to grow. And then initiate the county city collaboration and public engagement. A big portion of this comp plan update will be collaborating with the county and city of Walla Walla too, just to make sure that their plans are consistent. The counties started this process already. There's some countywide planning policies that have been drafted up and looking to get approved in the near future. And the portion that we're working on now is looking at the future growth, population numbers and housing numbers that are going to be applied to the county and then also distributed to each city. So, and that's what we'll be getting into more tonight. Then real quick, as we go forward, we'll be, updating the plans and regulations, looking at the urban growth boundary, see if there's areas that that we're able to grow or need to grow based on the population numbers. Update the comp plan, then we'll go into the development regulations, hold public meetings and meet with the city and community to get these plans adopted. Is there any questions at this point? I'm kind of quickly going through this part because as an overview, but if there's any questions, please let me know.
Hey, Justin, a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the governance committee that would do the overview and refine this comprehensive plan?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. Did you say who's the governing authority to review and update the comp plan?
Right. Is the committee, is the within the city itself?
Yes, the city is the governing authority to review and update the comp plan. It will need to go to the Department of Commerce with the state for review for consistency with the state requirements, and then that will be done at the beginning and end of the process as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Claudia Santillano. Where in the timeline are we now? Or is this a timeline that we have not started, but it will be soon?
We're at the very beginning of the timeline. We haven't quite started the work plan effort. Right now, we're doing coordination with the county regarding the land capacity analysis and getting started on the population projection review. But we will be starting this work plan and checklist very shortly. So as we mentioned, the one of the main efforts of the comprehensive plan is looking at your 20-year growth of the city and defining where and defining that you have enough land capacity to meet the growth that you're anticipating. There is a kind of a standard process, a 6-step process that's typically used to do the land capacity analysis, and I'll go through that here in a minute. But the whole idea is to look at, how much vacant land the city has, how much population growth you're anticipated to have within the city, and then apply that to then determine, do you have enough available vacant land for future growth, or do we need to identify other areas for the city to grow and to get additional land? So the current methodology that we're looking at doing, and this is all very preliminary at this point, so please, if you guys have suggestions or comments about this methodology as I go through them, please let me know, and we can bring that back to the table to review. But the first step is to determine the existing land within the urban growth area. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with between the city limits and the urban growth area. The city limits theoretically is supposed to identify what your 20-year growth is going to be. So the steps to do that is to identify any vacant land. So that would be any land within the city that has an improvement value of $500 or less. And identify any partially used land. And that is a parcel that's maybe has a improvement on it, but it's a larger parcel and it can be developed into at least 3 additional lots. And that would be considered a partially used land. And then an underutilized land is a piece of property that would, let's say, a residential home within a commercial zone. So it's a lesser intense use in a higher intense zone. So there's a potential that it could be redeveloped to a higher utilization. So that's the first step, identifying all 3 of those types of properties within the city, and see where that shakes out and what those acreages are.
Question.
Yeah.
So is this a standard way of categorizing land types? It seems like it would not catch maybe some types of lots that, based on improvement values of $1,000 instead of 500, or it can only be divided into 2 instead of 3. I mean, how maybe you could describe how standard these categories are over.
This is right now it's pretty standard from a guidebook that the state's put together. There are some other jurisdictions within the state that are modifying these numbers a little bit. So for instance, Spokane County looks at vacant land as land that has an improvement value of less than 5,000. And their partially utilized land has to be able to be split into 8 lots and not 3 lots, to be a little bit more realistic on that. And then their underutilized is similar to this, but it also has another caveat that if the use has a value on the property that's 8 times more than the value of the land, then it's not considered an underutilized property.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do have a question also. These land, are they private
Yeah.
land, public land, or company?
This would all be, well, I'll get to that and then when we get down to step 3, but right now, at this point, it would all be any property within the city that meets these requirements. But later on in the process, we will deduct out any public land.
Okay.
Justin, this is John.
Yeah,
Like the improvement value of less than $500, or the 3 lots, these are numbers that are based off of a previous meeting that the jurisdictions had together. And this is kind of essentially what the county is proposing. Isn't that correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So in terms of feedback, I mean, I'm would be pushing, I'm going to be pushing for higher numbers, like on maybe 8 lots or less or greater, or the $5,000 value, what the Spokane County is using, but,
Mhm. Yeah, and those numbers seem a little bit more realistic of, giving some incentive to a landowner to develop, these smaller lots. It's to split into 3 lots, there's not going to be a huge need. And it really doesn't have a big impact either to the city.
I have a question. Those lots, so when it says large enough to split into however many, 3 or 8 or however many, those are lots that will be identified within the city limits? Or would we be asking county to make part of, I forget what the process is called, to make county land part of the city so that then we can expand more on that? Yes, correct. Or would we, yeah. Is it already existing land within city limits, or would we be asking the county to do some kind of annexation so that the city can have more land?
This would be land that's within your current urban growth area. So it's your current city limits plus the additional urban growth area. That is land that could be annexed into the city.
right. So your step 1 heading says, determine existing land within the UGA, but we also look at the lands within this existing city limits, the vacant lots or underutilized lots, to determine what our available space is for future development. Or, yeah, and if it's in the UG urban growth area, then theoretically those properties would annex in at some point and be developed.
Correct. So then once all that land is identified on step 1, we start subtracting different elements to find the buildable area on those properties. So the first step 2 is to subtract non-developable land, and that would be land that's either been approved for a permit for a project or has been pre-platted or final platted. And the date that the county was looking at is between 2020 and 2025. So if there's been a pre-plat that's been approved at that time, then it wouldn't be applied to this review. The other lands that would be removed and identified as non-developable is any critical area, wetland, and steep slope area. Then also there was some talk about some buffers along streams as well. That would be non-developable as well. So that land would just come off the top and we'd remove that from any acreage from a parcel. Other lands that would be removed is lands that would be needed for a other purpose or a public purpose. And this was the comment earlier. So any as you develop a property, you're going to have to account for roads, future parks, future utility extensions, and future schools. And a general rule of thumb is that's usually about 25% of a property that gets developed. So if you had a 1 acre parcel that's being developed, we'd take off 25%, so you'd have, 3/4 of an acre that we would then consider as developable. Step 4 is take the developable land that's available and identify a market factor. So this is just identifying lands that are just putting together a number that's either wouldn't be developed. There's certainly certain property owners that will never or don't want to develop their property right now. So we have to account for that. And then there's just land that's not going to be as easy to develop or doesn't have that need. So the other idea for this is to identify lands that, or to make it not so tight that it raises inflation and cost of housing because there's not enough developable land. So we want to have a good buffer in there to have enough land within the city for development in the future that won't raise housing prices either. So what's being identified is that the vacant land would, straight vacant land would be have a 15% market factor, and a partially used would have a 55% market factor. So that percent is what wouldn't be developable. This one we'll probably be discussing a little more with the county on that. There's other jurisdictions that use a 30% market factor for all lands.
Yeah, Justin, I think the last time we went through this process, I want to say it was like a 25% market factor, and it included vacant and partially used. So would this be a more realistic application, do you think? If
it could be, with that partially used being 55%, I think that might help. Weed out some of those smaller lots that are have a structure on it. We would have to look at start applying the numbers to it and really see what the differences are between those. The 15% for vacant land seems a little low. I could see that increasing.
Thank you for the comparison. What is the basis for these numbers? Is it choosing from a range based on some heuristic or just pulling numbers out, or what? Sorry, just curious.
Yeah, some of it is, these numbers are coming from a state document that was put together on doing a land capacity analysis. Other numbers are some industry standards that are used. We could get you some more detailed information on that as well if you'd like.
I think that's enough for me for now. Thanks.
Okay. So steps 1 through 4, that will identify, the land by zone of what's available to be developed. And that, in the end, that will give us an acreage number and let's say there's 30 acres within, the multifamily zone that's developable. The next step is then going into step 5, determine the population capacity of that zone, and that will be determining a unit capacity by land use. And so that's your household size for each type of unit that would go on that property. And then also determining the density of development within each zone type and land use type. Typically, each zoning designation will have a minimum lot size. Typically don't use the minimum lot size when doing this analysis. We'll look at what's been built, realistically built within the last 5 years or so. So in this instance, we would look at each zone, look at what's been built in that zone, what the density was, and then that's what would be applied for realistic future development within that zoning designation. And then applying a household size to that, to the amount of units that would be developed within that zone, to determine what the population, future population growth capacity is within each zone designation.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Based on these market factor numbers you're looking at for vacant, partially used, undeveloped, what do the numbers look like in an annexation, saying you exceed some of those numbers and you're looking for more growth, but you can't acquire it based on too low of numbers? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is an annexation considered in the next 3 years is, I guess, the other part of the question.
So since this is looking at your urban growth area, and your annexation would have to be within your urban growth boundary. And so if we've identified where your urban growth area is, then annexation within that urban growth area wouldn't have to go through this process because it's already been reviewed during this comp plan update. Did I answer that?
No.
Okay.
All right. I came from Walla Walla. We were annexed in a Table Rock subdivision out there.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know the guidelines to why we were annexed. There's positives and negatives for it for a lot of different angles. I'm just trying to understand why we would or would not expand the boundaries if we're looking for more housing options and we do not have them based on vacant 15% numbers. I'm just curious.
No, and that's what we'll be doing for this comp plan update, is looking at these numbers, trying to make sure you get enough land so you can annex in future property. And that's what we're doing today.
I have a question. Has the area for the urban growth area, has that been identified? Or this is just, I guess, has that been identified?
Let me pull up. I have a city map here that shows.
So we have some areas of interest. So we have our existing urban growth boundary, which is very small, almost non-existent, because we've annexed a lot of the areas. For instance, south of Majonier Road, we've annexed a couple 100 acres there for future growth. Yep, down there. Thank you, Justin.
Yep.
There's some areas potentially south of the Martin Airfield property that might be of some interest in coming into an urban growth area. There's areas up near on the north end of town, just west of the manufactured home park that's up there. Used to be a sod farm that a developer owns and is interested in bringing that into our urban growth area. Yep. And then I guess jumping back down to the south side of town again, for those of you who remember the last time we went through this process, there's property down there, that both commercial and potentially residential, that there's some interest for expanded urban growth area. So we do, you can see all the larger parcels in yellow. which are our residential zones that look undeveloped. Couple of them in the villages of Garrison Creek, those larger ones off of Garrison Village Way. Those have preliminary. One of them has a final plat on it, and the homes are in plan review right now. But the second half of that has preliminary plat approval. So we'll be able to take those numbers that the preliminary final plat numbers in step 2, we'll be able to pull those out. So those will count those as essentially developed lands. But we still have some large unplanned areas that can accommodate a lot of growth, which so it'll be very interesting to see once we settle on some, final numbers and all of these various steps that we have to work through with the county, how that works out for us, whether or not, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the population allocations and how that population will equate to the need for dwelling units.
Yeah, so in this exhibit here, everything that's as a zoning designation, so anything that has a color assigned to it is within the city limits right now. And then this red line is the urban growth boundary for the city. So there's only just a few pockets that could be annexed in at this point.
I understand that the yellow areas, it's residential. What is blue and what is red and what is green?
Blue is public use, so the schools and then city-owned property. The red is commercial property. The green, is that a downtown designation, John?
Yeah, that's our College Avenue downtown district.
Yeah. And then the purple would be also public, that's the university. And then the darker brown is the multifamily.
The dark brown is multifamily, so apartment complexes. Yeah. The red zone, which was mentioned as commercial, also allows for multifamily development within it, so apartment complexes.
So the yellow is not necessarily single family, but the brown is multifamily.
Right. The yellow is primarily single family, which could include duplexes, accessory dwelling units, townhomes.
But not apartment buildings.
But not apartment buildings. We have a fairly flexible residential district. That being said, there is the ability to do a master plan development, which allows the developer to make a proposal to do apartments and mixed use development within those yellow districts. It's a higher level of scrutiny that they have to go through.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a question about step 5.
Yeah.
I think it was 5, maybe it was 6. Sorry, my screen. Oh, yeah, it's 5. So you were looking at people per unit using historic and other data. And maybe you said this, I apologize. Could you maybe just touch on that again? What do you mean by other?
The state has through their modeling through the Office of Financial Management, they do population projections and housing projections. And they're proposing that, and they've identified household populations based on the use type. So a single family home may have a higher population than a apartment unit does. And so applying a different household size to each of those types of uses. But then state data is coming out saying that household size is shrinking, and it has been shrinking due to a number of factors. And so they're projecting that in the future, in 20 years, that the household size will be slightly lower than what it is today.
When you say size, you're not talking square foot, you're talking people per house.
People per house, yeah. So right now it's about 2.4 people per house.
Sure, it's going down. Got it.
Yeah.
How often are these models updated? I guess the reason I'm asking is because without going into great detail, I think we can all agree that there are some changes afoot in demographics, immigration, if you will, potentially affecting the city, and wondering if those might affect projected population over.
Right. So the state does do estimates and updates on an annual basis. However, for a comprehensive plan update, they issue it's called like a Growth Management Act population forecast. And that's the forecast that every jurisdiction has to use for the comp plan updates.
Okay.
But they do estimates every year on future population growth. So, and current housing or current housing and current population as well. So then, as we go into step 6, that's just comparing the population and unit capacity with the forecast. So the capacity that we have within the city urban growth area today, and then identifying what the difference is with the future forecast. And then that applies into identifying if future land area is needed. And then the next process would, if it is, identifying where the best place for that future growth is going to be. So the next couple slides will go into the population projections that we're looking at, that we've been reviewing with the county starting last week, and we'll continue to review with the county in the upcoming few weeks. And then we'll get into the projected housing needs as well. So as I mentioned, the Growth Management Act or the Office of Financial Management issues this Growth Management Act projections for each county within the state. The projections are specific to a county, they're not specific to a city. So they'll give it out they'll distribute it to the county, and then the county and the jurisdictions within the county meet and work together to then distribute that population throughout the jurisdictions within the county. These projections are also provided on a low, medium, and high range. So high would be the highest growth factor that could be anticipated, and the low is a low growth city. Most jurisdictions are in the mid to high range. So today we're looking at a population of 63,000 within the county, with a future growth of up to 67,334, and that's with the medium range. And then also the housing is projected to go from 24,000 to 28,000. The county has been reviewing the data and looking at different growth rates of each jurisdiction within the county. So not every jurisdiction is growing at the same rate. We could argue that College Place is growing faster than the county or the city of Walla Walla. And so they potentially could need to have a higher amount of the percentage of future growth. So that's what we're looking at today. these numbers here is the city's population in 2010 of 8,767 or 65. That percent share at that time in 2010 was 14.9% of the county's total population. In 2020, the population grew to 9,902, which increased a whole percentage of the county population to 15.8. And this has been a pattern for the last 30, 40 years, is that the city of College Place is getting a larger percentage of the county's whole population.
Question.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too difficult to answer, but is that because we are taking land from the county growing in acreage, or because we have a higher density within land available? Over.
Partial, it's a little of both. Not so much as taking land that's already developed within the county, but that you're developing at a denser rate as the county, and then also development with the Growth Management Act. Ideally, development should happen within cities that have utilities that can build at a higher density as well.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Would you know if there's been benchmarking that has been done with cities similar to College Place in size and area, like square footage, mileage, whatever? And has that benchmarking been taken into consideration to prepare this proposal?
What, like, benchmarking of what their rates are and what their future growth is going to be?
Everything to do. So was a similar city, same size, looked at in order to see how this city could grow and how this city could benefit in the long run?
Yeah, not at this point, I don't believe. Have you done anything like that in the past, John?
Well, I mean, there are cities that are comparable to us in size. We used to measure up pretty well to like Airway Heights, although they've seen a tremendous amount of growth and they've surpassed us. Liberty Lake is a similar size city. But there's so many different factors from one community to another that will affect growth, from jobs and vicinity to other larger areas and jobs, so it's hard to compare ourselves with other communities when you're talking about growth. It's such a regional thing.
Mm-hmm. And the amount of land available, some cities, when the Growth Management Act started, they were able to get a large, chunk of land within their, either annexed into their city or within their urban growth area. And so they have that available for future growth. College Places doesn't have that at this point. And so let's take that into account. So for future growth, we're looking at, it's been proposed to have that College Place would be 17% of the 20-year growth projection, which would increase the population to 13,530. So I guess my question to the commission is how do you feel like the growth of the city has been? Do you feel like it's growing faster than communities around you in the county and city of Walla Walla, that we should, plan for higher numbers, or not?
Let me ask you a question. So that growth is projected on everything else staying the same. So the number of employers, the opportunities for recreation, all of that. Is that right? Is it just projected on birth rates, or is it also projected on people coming in from other areas and retiring here or wanting to raise their families here?
It looks at birth rates and migration rates and yeah.
Question. I believe you had said that these projections come from the Office of Finance Management.
Yeah.
I guess I'm struggling with them a little bit, and maybe you can't speak to it, but what I've been hearing prior to this information is that we actually have a negative growth curve, that there are less people being born here than are dying here, and any growth in the community is from people moving in, which is increasingly hampered as our cost of housing goes higher and higher. And there doesn't seem to be a break coming in that. So projecting continued growth seems overly positive.
Yes, I have seen those reports as well. And that tipping point is out past this 20-year timeframes from what I understood.
Really? I mean, we're already over 400,000 for the median for a home, and we think the tipping point for homes being unaffordable is more than 20 years away.
Oh, no, that's not what I meant. I meant what you were saying with the growth rate. I've seen those same numbers too. The growth and the death rate's gonna be larger than the birth rate within the state, and so the population forecast is to grow for the statewide is going to be from that in-migration, most likely.
Okay. That does make sense on a state level to me. My understanding, and I'm not an economist, so I may have misunderstood the last economist presentation that I watched, but my understanding is that it's already negative for our county.
Okay.
Okay. I don't have a suggestion to make, just acknowledging that I think that these numbers, even though they came from OFM, might be more hopeful than we can expect to actually see come to fruition.
Mhm.
Angie, where did you get that information from? Was that from a presentation that was done?
Yeah, it
by-
was the last Economic Development Committee presentation that had the state economist that comes in. So I think that would have been in November out at the port.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to share, I've lived here for almost 18 years. And when I moved to this area and we were looking for a house, the real estate agents were telling us that there were approximately 10,000 in Walla Walla. So roughly 50,000. And that was that was back in 2007. But when I'm looking at the numbers that you have here, it looks like in 2010, it was less than 9,000. And in 2020, it was still less than 10,000. And so I don't know, having lived here for 18 years, I don't know that there will be a 17% increase in population. Part of me says not really, because even though 17% of 10,000, it's not a whole lot. I mean, it's not, it's reasonable.
The 17% is our population share within the entire county. So that would just be an increase from 2020 of 15.8% in 2020 to 17% share in
entire county.
2046
In the entire county. So including Walla Walla, including like all the, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So it's
but-
not a 17% increase.
Gotcha. But at this point, we still have a crisis in housing, availability for housing, and especially affordable housing. And so to your question, Justin, is the 17%, does that seem like it would happen? I would think so, because it takes account like the whole county, not just, if it was just College Place, I would say no, probably not, because of the way things work. jobs and families and, seasonal numbers that we have here for college, and then they go away in the summer and then they graduate and all of that. But as a county, potentially, I would think that that would be a reasonable number.
This is Nick. It's hard to know what'll happen in the future. Is that last number, the 13,000, is that a straight line projection, same rate of growth as we've seen recently?
I believe, yeah. So this is this 13,000 is from the high projection, and this
Okay, so the mid.
11,000 is from the mid from up here.
Okay. So all right, thank you.
Yep. So the new process that the state is requiring for comp plan updates for this cycle is to look at the housing more closely. In the past, it was a common practice to look at what your future housing needs are and then just apply that to your single family rate to identify how much additional land you need. Now the state's requiring you to look down into the different types of housing and apply housing units in areas within your city to accommodate for future growth in multifamily housing in apartments, multiplex, duplex type units, triplex, and then also single family as well. So there's a formula that's been put together that we're under review right now with the county. This isn't set in stone at all. We're still working through these numbers and figuring it out. But we take that population growth and the housing growth, and it determines what the percentage of the county is going to be, and then it also defines the different levels of housing that's going to be needed. And the housing is broken up into the 0 to 30% range, and that's the percent of median income. So residents that are 0 to 30% of the median income, 30 to 50%, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, 100 to 120. And then this chart down here identifies what type of housing unit generally those ranges would be needing in the future. So your single family unit is typically someone who has 120% or greater median household income. Your multiplex would be between 50 to that 120%, and then apartment units would be from that 30 or from 0 to 50% of the median income. And so this table identifies the number of units that would be needed for each of these levels. And part of our analysis will then be looking at the available vacant land, what zoning and land use designation that's in, and whether or not there's enough.
So
enough
Justin,
land to absorb that.
If I'm reading this right, this formula that OFM has come up with, or I guess it was Commerce came up with, we don't need any single family homes.
That's
and we basically need 22 multiplexes and 14 duplexes over the next 20 years. That's ridiculous.
right. Yeah. So And they haven't, based on this formula, none of the cities, even Walla Walla doesn't have any single family type. So there's a disconnect that we feel like there might be with this formula that we need to iron out and work on.
Wait, but the unincorporated rural area has 304 housing units, single family units.
Right.
Interesting.
Yes. So that and that unincorporated rural would be all of the county land. So all of the single family units are being identified as going to the county. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the city can't develop single family units. It just means that when we look at the land capacity and the land use designations, that there's enough options within the city for different types of housing. So the other study that we're looking at, and we're going to be meeting with Commerce in the city of Walla Walla and the county to discuss, is a few years back, Walla Walla and College Place and several other jurisdictions in the area did a regional housing action plan. And it also looked at these similar income levels and housing needs. That was more, so this worksheet is like a statewide worksheet that was put together. This other plan, this action plan, is a local analysis of what the local needs are. And we're going to be comparing this study with the other formula to see if there's a way we can work out a better scenario for what the future housing needs might be. So, in this case, it identifies College Place has opportunity for 261 standard single family detached lots, 205 smaller lots, cottages type units, 155 townhomes, and then go up to multifamily units after that. So.
Question.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about the difference between the state formula and the formula that gave these numbers? Because I'm feeling a little lost on how we got to these numbers, even though I think they look more reasonable.
Yeah. I haven't got to that point yet where I've actually dug into how these numbers were created, and that's what we'll be. We just got these numbers here last week, and so they're very fresh and new, and we're working through them, but we wanted to present them to you guys today to show you where we're at, and as we find out more information about them, and see what type of modifications we can make to them, we'll do that. We'll be presenting that to you.
But the Walla Walla Regional Housing Action Plan, that was completed in 2021, and it was funded by the Department of Commerce, actually, and it was primarily driven because of the jurisdictions really saw that we were in a housing crisis, and we wanted to partner together to come up with this housing action plan. And so it's a very in-depth study that was adopted by all of the parties involved. And because of the way the data was analyzed, I mean, it's comparable. I mean, we're looking at the same, the different income levels, and using similar population allocation numbers, but coming up with very different results. So that's where there's probably gonna be some back and forth with discussions with the county and the city of Walla Walla, and most likely Commerce, just because we're not, from our understanding of it, we're not required to use the statewide formula that that Commerce came up with. We believe we can use more in-depth local research that's been done. So it's going to be a discussion that we'll have to work through, process we'll have to work through.
On the projected housing need, under College Place, the numbers that are listed here, like the 261, 205, those are identified to be in the urban growth area. So not necessarily already in place.
Correct. That would be a future growth.
Future addition to what we already have. And what the city already has, do we know how many like properties and how many of those are unoccupied? How many of those are abandoned? How many of those, do we have a good feel for all of the housing and what the status of that housing is? To where we know, yes, we need to build so many more because we need to accommodate this many people.
We haven't done that analysis yet, and that'll be our next step.
So some of the things that we were talking about in those steps 1 through 6 is that's that methodology that we're in discussions with the county and the city of Walla Walla on, so that we all need to agree on, you know, are we pulling out properties that are vacant properties that have a value of 5,000 or less? The market factor, the underutilized lands. Once we've settled on that methodology, then Justin can start doing his GIS analysis using the county numbers and extracting out certain properties, so that we'll end up with a total, 30 acres of residential, 10 of, the multifamily. This is how many acres we have in the urban growth area that's available, and we'll, come up with that.
Gotcha.
Information.
And then, so a follow-up question, is it within this committee's purview to, because I feel like there's two different issues. One is the number of houses available, and the other is the actual accessibility, like the pricing, somebody being able to afford to buy, a property or to rent or whatever. Is it within this committee's purview to help with any of that, especially the being able to access for our residents to be able to access properties?
Well, that's the tricky part. So the figures that we have up here on the slide, and then the ones from the slide before that, are looking at the various income levels and the hypothetical number of units that we need for those income levels. And, we can plan for that in our comp plan, and we can say we need this many apartments and we need this many single family homes or this many duplexes. But the part that we don't have any control over is who builds those. Will the developers actually build the apartments if we're saying we need them, or will they just stick to building single family homes? Does the housing authority need to build more affordable units? That's the hard part, is actually getting the units built that we've planned for. We don't have control over that.
But your purview is land use. It's not actions to make housing more accessible or provide breaks of some sort. It's land use.
And that's what we'll be going through this process of. Is there other land? Should there be other land use opportunities or, zones or changes in development standards, requirements that allow for different variety of housing to occur on different zones and land use types? And do we need to rezone or change land use designations in areas to allow for different development opportunities?
Well, thank you, Justin. I think that's the end of your slides.
Yes.
And great questions from all of you commissioners. I appreciate that. Are there any, before I turn it back over to Angie, are there any other last minute thoughts or questions? Be happy to continue the discussion if needed.
If we're projecting the family growth at all, why aren't we projecting for more useful public land like, parks and recreation? And stuff like that? Why have it saturated with people that know where to get out to, integrate with each other? When I was a kid, we used to have Kiwanis Park, and I don't remember how often, but every so often they come through, they use the public address system and the arrow alarm system, make sure that it wasn't always just a warning. Sometimes it was just a, hey, we're going to have a Kiwanis all you can eat pancake thing down at Kiwanis Park, and it's just very quickly be down there, and it, I mean, I was feel some people like it was coming, or to make it just happen overnight. But it kept us aware of our need to be part of the community at all times. And it let us use our public address system. I mean, we're growing into something that I grew up being more than ever than that happened. We're becoming cities instead of towns.
Thank you for your comments. This is not an open discussion with the public. This is a workshop with the. Thank you. And yeah, sure. We do plan for public spaces, parks and recreation. We actually have a park plan that we're working on right now with our Parks and Recreation Board, but parks and open space are things that we include in our comprehensive planning. Angie, if you'd like to take control of the meeting, and I don't think we have any other agenda items on for this evening.
Absolutely. I think we are ready to conclude the meeting. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on March 18th, 2025. And then I don't know if you want a repeat of this, but I'm going to repeat it. I think at the last meeting they asked if we can try to attend in person moving forward. So I'm going to commit to being in person next month when I don't have the flu.
Thank you for bringing that up, Angie. And it's just, we have a wonderful meeting space here, and but we understand that life is busy and sometimes it's much more convenient to meet from home. But if you can attend in person, I would appreciate it. And Justin, our consultant, most likely will be attending remotely just because he's in the Tri-Cities area, but we will make him come here occasionally in person.
Great. All right. Do we have to have a motion to conclude, or do we just conclude?
Yes, please. A motion.
Okay. I would entertain a motion if someone would like to make that.
Yeah, I motion to close this thing.
Perfect. Can I get a second to that, please?
I second.
Awesome. We have a first and a second. All those in favor of concluding the meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Yep. Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right. It passes unanimously. Have a good night, everybody.